segment of the show I affectionately like to call the Chit Chat. These are cardboard chits. These are specifically from the game Small World, very popular game by Days of Wonder. We might look at it in a later episode. And they're just commonly known in the industry as chits. They are punched out of a large cardboard sort of a slab when you get the game. And just, it's a common term, clever name, I used to say myself.
Fun,
so in this section, we will talk about sort of whatever's on our minds. It'll tend to be more theory-based, tend to be more oriented toward trends and larger issues in the gaming community. Sometimes we'll talk about elements in games themselves, sort of things we see and like in different games, sort of common mechanics, things like that. Other times we'll look at things from the player's perspective. We'll take a look at things that players face, issues with getting together for a group, what makes a player the type of player he is, how players fall in different categories, call mistakes, things like that. Today, we're talking about the pretty well-known discussion of American games versus European games. You see this a lot if you peruse the Board Game Geek forums. It's sort of an amorphous distinction. There's no one thing that makes an American game or a European game.
Well, there are wood blocks.
It's true, there are wooden cubes, and those are a pretty strong indicator of a Euro game. But, we'll start with that. American games tend to tell stories. They tend to be more thematic. They tend to want to capture a specific feel and have very distinct characteristics. They tend to have a lot more asymmetrical gameplay, something we'll look at in a very soon episode. But they tend to be more asymmetrical. They tend to have different starting points, different powers, different things that differentiate you from the other players. They're very sort of individualistic. European-style games are a little more communitarian. They are often not as competitive, and generally the themes are a little more thin and a little more cooperative. Instead of trying to smash your opponent into the ground, as in Yomi, you're trying to compete with him and get the resources before he does.
Now, can I borrow your glasses for just a moment?
It's an odd request, but I will allow it.
Well, you see, gentle viewers, one might say, were one scholarly or of a scholarly inclination, that the reason these games have such a distinction is because of the different ways of thought behind the European model of politics and the American model of politics.
Now that I have my glasses back, I can see where you're coming from. I do believe that distinction does exist and is pervasive. But that being said, American games tend to, and we'll take some examples. For instance, with the theming, a very popular European-style game would be Settlers of Catan. Catan is a game where all the players are competing to build civilizations of settlements and cities using resources that they collect. Now, the players will never come into direct conflict, although they will block each other off from paths. They'll never actually destroy each other's infrastructures, for instance.
Although, trust me, it is just as infuriating to have your longest road blocked as it is to lose a city.
That is true. It certainly can be infuriating at times. But it's less about trying to beat your opponent directly as it is trying to circumvent them. So, an American game like Risk, for instance, very different. I mean, you're trying to expand your influence, but you're doing so by going right through an opponent. In terms of luck, American games tend to have a little more luck, although this really it's tough to say that one is luckier than the other. But if I had to pick, American games have more luck. They tend to be more comeback mechanisms. American games, it's nice to have an American game where the underdog wins. It's nice to have a game where the player who looks like he's out can come back and really take it and make for a memorable experience. I think that's a big part of the American game. And also a term you'll hear bandied about a bit is Ameritrash. Originally this was sort of derogatory, but now it's kind of more of a badge of honor. If you've ever been to the website Fortress Ameritrash, the forums there will refer to it kind of lovingly as Ameritrash. Partly, I think, because of the high degree of luck. You'll have a lot more dice rolling, a lot more sort of flip of the card games with American games.
Aside from that, there can often be sort of a production difference in the games. Like the way the sort of pieces you're likely to see with an American game are
Exactly.
Well, I think Smart World is kind of an example of this. Like, these pieces have like very, if you can see it, very cartoony art, very almost like almost like a winking, yeah, this is goofy kind of thing to it. These are very clearly a very stylistic, very artistic pieces. A lot of Euro games tend to have things like, as I mentioned before, the wood blocks. You have little wooden cubes. Carcassonne is famous for its
More
meeples.
representations, yeah.
Right.
More abstract representations. I agree with that completely. I mean, with American games, you have pieces that are kind of more sculpted. That you often have pieces on plastic runners, more with American games, that look like what they're trying to depict. And often these will be outlandish things like, skeleton pirates or big trolls with big noses to match. You have more
So
of
this
sort
game
of,
just gets me.
of goofy theme with American. I don't think it's necessarily goofy. I mean, you have a lot of seriously themed American games too. And I mean, even the distinction is weird now because you have games that are not American that I would think fall into the category of American style games. I mean, I think Neuroshima Hex, for instance, a game that we both enjoy, is a very American style game. It's asymmetrical. It's got different powers. It's got a lot of theming, a lot of luck, but it's a Polish design.
Right.
So,
in fact, even some of the factions have names like New York and Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's not quite so simplistic as being games in America versus games in Europe. And of course, you have a bigger gaming community in Europe too, a bigger board gaming community especially. So, I mean, you have a lot of American style games have sort of migrated there, and vice versa.
Right. And since, like, and a lot of European games have sort of influenced the American scene, we've come a long way since Don't Wake Daddy. Like,
That's a nice rep.
There's like a lot, like especially after games like Catan came over here, there was sort of an upswing in the popularity of board games themselves.
Yeah. I mean, the mid-'90s definitely marked a sort of biggest surge in not just popularity, but quality. I think you're absolutely right. I think the quality went up dramatically when games like Catan became popular over here. You have a lot of, what we consider gateway games, Catan, Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, games that are becoming a little bit well-known here and are sort of bringing more and more people into it. I know just from my experience in my gaming group, it's been very easy to get people into it through those games. And they really do live up to their name and reputation as gateway games.
Right. Like in my first experience with the group that we all play, and the first week I came, I played Catan. And since then, I've expanded into a lot of more different games, but that's certainly the game that drew me in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's just been the way with the industry, too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it for today's Chit Chat. We'll see you next week for another section. So I'm Mike.
And I'm Patrick. This has been The Big Game Hunter.
If you like what you saw today, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can see it at the link there.
I think it's there.
Oh, well, you should subscribe to the link. I'm sure you can find it. And you should also like us on Facebook and check out our website.
If you want to join us next week, we're going to be going over the game Gosu. We're going to be discussing the gaming community as a whole and meetups amongst groups of gamers.
See you then.